Tonight, the White House Correspondents' Dinner will get a do-over after an armed gunman derailed the original event, which means tonight President Trump will address a room full of journalists, many of whom he's attacked over their work as White House correspondents. For that reason, many of these journalists are saying that this dinner can't be business as usual. A letter signed by hundreds of former and current journalists urged the Correspondents Association to hold Donald Trump accountable, saying, quote, "We believe it is hypocritical to celebrate the First Amendment in front of the man who relentlessly attacks it." Joining me, New York Times opinion columnist David French, professor of law at Hofstra University, James Sample in a jar, and back with us, Mona Charen. All right, David, I'm going to start with you on this. It is a tradition, and this is the first year Donald Trump has decided to go. How do you celebrate the First Amendment with somebody who's attacked it?
Well, you're not celebrating with him. You're celebrating in spite of him. And one of the things you might be celebrating is the fact that a federal judge held the Trump administration's feet to the fire so thoroughly yesterday that the administration withdrew its subpoenas of Times journalists after highlighting errors in the process, after highlighting their overreach. They'd even gone after family members. So you have to make it absolutely very clear that the defense of the First Amendment right now is not a cooperative enterprise between the press and a president. Right now, the defense of the First Amendment is an antagonistic enterprise with the press against a president that is willing to and proven to be willing, ready, and able to violate the First Amendment with impunity and at scale to attack his political opponents.
So what do you do in that room tonight if you are a journalist, Mona?
I think you don't necessarily need to invite the president. This is a private organization, the White House Correspondents Association. They can invite or disinvite anybody they want. And it's nice to invite the president in happier times. But when, as David said, you have a president who has made his contempt for the First Amendment very evident, when he routinely threatens to withhold or withdraw the licenses from television stations that don't cover his speeches, or sends the Justice Department after reporters merely for reporting on his Qatari airplanes inadequacies. You are dealing with someone who is at war with the First Amendment. And since the White House Correspondents Association is all about celebrating freedom of the press and the best work that journalists do, next time you don't need to invite him.
So here's the issue, and this is where the binding belt encloses me on this. Americans don't trust the media any longer, and it's been on a downward slope for many years now, many decades. Donald Trump accelerated it, yes. Social media has divided us even further. All sorts of outside factors, but we have been dealing with this for a long time in the press. Haven't found a good solution for it. At the same time, in order to continue doing the thing we do, most companies have big corporate ownership structures that enable them to continue doing the journalism that is so necessary. But those corporate entities are then put in a position by this White House to bend the knee. I mean, we'll put up on the screen Donald Trump demanding money from various media companies. We've talked about this. You understand it. He's suing the BBC. He's suing the Des Moines Register. He's suing News Corp and the Wall Street Journal. He's gotten a settlement from Paramount, from Meta, from YouTube, from X, from ABC News and Disney. Stephen Colbert was canceled. Jimmy Kimmel was suspended and then reinstated. How do you fix this? We don't have the same viewership and trust and readership that we once did. And in order to continue operating, you have these corporate structures, and then it's, again, subject to the president. How do you fix it, David?
It's a great question, Katie, and there's not a great fix right now, especially in a very closely divided country. But here's one thing that I would say as an option, something that needs to be really considered. And that is, at the end of this administration, you're going to see, in all likelihood, Trump engaging in mass-scale pardons. But I would say that there is still an option that is available to our branches of government, even in the face of a pardon. And that is for those officials in the Trump administration who systematically violated the First Amendment rights of American citizens and systematically attack the freedom of the press, I think it should be on the table in the event of a solid victory by the other side that you impeach these officials and convict them so that they can never serve in public federal office ever again. Because if we actually have a situation in which people are able to violate the Constitution with impunity, receive pardons for any criminal activity, enjoy the benefit of broad, wide immunity for civil violations, and there's nothing that happens to them, they're just going to really reload and recharge for the next time that they're in power. So I do think we need to think creatively about, is there a way that even in the face of pardons and immunities, we can hold people accountable when they systematically violate the First Amendment?
Is there a way?
Well, everyone has their role to play. And so with respect to playing the role, think about society as a team sport. The New York Times played its role. They stood up in this instance. The judge, the courts stood up in this instance. And yeah, the New York Times has resources that a lot of press organizations don't have. But they used those resources. They put them on the line. The chilling effect, even though subpoenas get withdrawn, even though license revocations don't actually occur, the chilling effect is nonetheless real. So take, for example, the hypothetical, and it's not a hypothetical, we just don't know exactly to whom it applies. The hypothetical reporter, the hypothetical press organization that faces the same kind of pressure that the New York Times had to face over the last 2 weeks. That kind of an organization, without the resources of the New York Times, without the lawyers of the New York Times, without access to the Southern District of New York, without the ability to file a motion to quash or get them to withdraw, that chilling effect, there are sources who did not speak up and tell the truth about things that would embarrass the administration for fear of reporters receiving a subpoena, or even worse, in the case of the Washington Post scenario, a full-on search without even an opportunity for a motion to quash. So the answer to your question, it's a long way to get to it. Everyone has a role to play, Katie, in preserving the freedom of the press.